Beyond the familiar glow of our galaxy lies a region so vast and so empty that light crosses it almost alone. Travel inward, and the stars begin to thin. The galaxies fall away, one by one, until there is nothing, no light, no warmth, no company, for hundreds of millions of light years in every direction. This is the Boötes Void. It is not a hole in the universe, it is the universe, showing you what it is mostly made of: emptiness, on a scale the mind was never built to hold. Tonight, we are going to travel into that emptiness, not as a number on a page, but as a place. We will follow the void out past the last familiar stars, into the vast dark spaces between galaxies, and toward the strangest, loneliest region ever found. A hole in the cosmos so large it should not be there. If you find something calming in drifting through the vastness of space, consider liking this video and subscribing. It's how a new journey like this one finds you each night. Now, settle in. Let's begin. To understand the emptiest place in the universe, we have to begin somewhere far more familiar. We have to begin with empty space itself, because almost nothing about it is what it seems. Consider the air resting in the room around you. It feels like nothing, and yet that air is crowded beyond counting. There are about as many molecules in a single quiet breath as there are breaths of air in the entire atmosphere of the Earth. Countless, restless, colliding millions of times each second, holding up the sky, carrying sound, pressing gently against the skin. By any honest measure, the air is not empty at all. It is an ocean. And still, it is mostly nothing. Look closer, far closer, into a single atom of that air. Almost all of its mass gathers into a tiny core at the center, the nucleus, while the rest is only a faint haze of electrons spread far around it. If that nucleus were a marble resting at the center of a great cathedral, the electrons would drift somewhere near the distant walls, and everything in between, the entire body of the atom, would be empty space, not thin air, nothing. The solid floor below, the weight of a hand, the mountains and the oceans, all of it is built almost entirely from emptiness, held together by forces that cannot be seen. Matter is mostly the memory of where something is, wrapped around the vast quiet of where it is not. And even that quiet is not perfectly still. Down at the smallest scale, there is no such thing as a perfect, untouched emptiness. The void itself seems to hum, very faintly, never entirely at rest. We need not chase that strangeness tonight. It is enough to know that emptiness, even at its purest, is never quite as silent as it looks. So even here, in the most crowded corner of the cosmos we will ever know, emptiness is already the rule. We simply live too close to the exceptions to notice. Let that sit for a moment, because it is stranger than it first sounds. The hand resting on the blanket feels solid. The floor holds your weight without the slightest give. The walls of the room stand firm, and the whole warm, dense, reassuring world presses back against you exactly as a solid thing should. And yet, every part of it, the hand, the floor, the walls, the body lying still in the night, is almost entirely empty space, a sparse scattering of tiny cores wrapped in faint hazes of motion, with vast nothing in between. What feels like solidity is not the touching of full things, it is the gentle pushing apart of fields, the refusal of one cloud of emptiness to pass through another. We have never once in all our lives touched anything truly solid, because there is almost nothing truly solid to touch. We are mostly space, resting on mostly space, inside a universe that is more emptiness still. And none of it has ever felt like falling. The emptiness holds. It has always held. There is something quietly steadying in that so much of what carries us is, in truth, the patient nothing in between. Now, let the room fall away. Rise gently through the atmosphere. That thin blue skin of breathable air, only a few dozen kilometers deep. Pass through it, and the crowding begins to thin, almost at once. The sky darkens from blue to black, not because something has been added, but because the air that scattered the sunlight has simply run out. 100 kilometers up, the The atmosphere has all but surrendered to the dark, and here begins the first true emptiness, the space around our own world. And that protective skin is thinner than almost anyone supposes. The whole of the breathable air, the layer that holds every cloud and every bird and every breath ever drawn by anything that has ever lived, is shallow almost beyond belief. A film so slight that if the Earth were shrunk to the size of an apple, the air would be thinner than the apple's skin. Above it there is no gentle fading into space, no long twilight border. There is only the thin bright shell, and then, with startling suddenness, the dark. Every living thing we know of, in all of time, has spent its whole existence pressed inside that one slender layer of warmth, never once leaving it but for a handful of brief, fragile journeys. We are creatures of the thin film, looking out from inside it at an emptiness that begins only a short drive overhead, straight up, and never ends. It is not perfectly empty, even now. The sun is always breathing outward, a faint and constant stream of particles called the solar wind, flowing past the Earth and out through the space between the planets. But this wind is impossibly thin. Near the Earth, a single cup of that space might hold only a few thousand particles, where that same cup, filled with ordinary air, would hold more particles than there are grains of sand on every beach on Earth. The space between us and the sun is not nothing, but it is closer to nothing than almost anything the mind is built to picture. And it is into this thinness that everything we have ever sent has traveled. The sunlight that warms your face crosses it in 8 minutes. The same stretch would take a fast spacecraft years. In all that space between the Earth and the sun, there is essentially nothing to slow a traveler, nothing to push against, nothing to meet. Only the faint solar wind streaming silently outward, and the occasional lonely speck of dust, and otherwise a vacuum so deep that the finest laboratories on Earth cannot come close to matching it. We tend to think of space as beginning somewhere far away, exotic and remote, but it begins just overhead, and it is almost perfectly empty from the very first kilometer. The warm, crowded world ends, and the great vacuum of the cosmos starts, closer to us than most cities lie from their neighbors, and the planets themselves do little to fill it. Picture the whole familiar family of worlds, and the impulse is to imagine them close together, a crowded household of planets. They are not. Between the orbit of one world and the next, lie distances so wide that the planets are little more than scattered specks in a great dark hall. Light from the sun, which reaches us in about 8 minutes, takes more than 4 hours to crawl out to Neptune, the most distant of the planets, drifting some 30 times farther from the sun than we do. And even Neptune is not the edge. Beyond it lies a wide, cold belt of icy worlds, the Kuiper Belt, a faint ring of frozen debris circling out to perhaps 50 times the Earth's distance from the sun, where Pluto and its kindred move through the dark so slowly that a single one of their long years can outlast a human life many times over. And there is a place closer in whose very name conjures a crowd, the asteroid belt, the broad ring of tumbling rock that circles the sun between the orbits of Mars and the giant Jupiter. The pictures we carry of it are of a dense field of boulders, packed so close that a ship would have to weave for its life between them. The truth is almost the exact opposite. The asteroids are real, and there are many millions of them, but they are scattered through so enormous a volume of space that the average gap between one and the next runs to hundreds of thousands, often millions of kilometers. Every spacecraft we have ever flown outward has passed straight through the belt without the slightest danger, because there was, in any direction it looked, very nearly nothing there to strike. Even the most crowded-sounding neighborhood between the planets turns out, when you finally arrive, to be a vast dark room with a few rare stones adrift in it. It helps to shrink the whole thing down to something the hand can hold. Imagine the sun reduced to the size of a large beach ball. On that scale, the Earth would be a peppercorn rolling along some 30 paces away. Mighty Jupiter, a chestnut at perhaps 150 paces. and distant Neptune, a small bead nearly a kilometer off. And in all the space between those scattered seeds, the entire breadth of the solar system, there would be essentially nothing at all, a few specks of planet, a scatter of dust too fine to see, and otherwise an enormous, silent emptiness, with the warm ball of the sun, a single point of light dwindling behind. That is the true shape of the place we call home. Not a crowded system of worlds, but a handful of motes adrift in a great dark hall, held in their slow circles by a gravity that reaches across the emptiness without ever filling it. And still the sun's domain reaches further. The solar wind blows outward for billions of kilometers, past every planet, past the frozen worlds of the Kuiper belt, until at last it grows so thin and so weak that it can no longer hold back the colder emptiness pressing in from beyond. That boundary has a name, the heliopause, the quiet shoreline where the sun's influence finally ends. Only 2 spacecraft have ever crossed it, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, and they reached it only after more than 35 years of travel. Think of what that crossing meant. Those 2 small machines left the Earth in the late 1970s, when much of the world had never seen a personal computer. They flew outward for the whole of a human generation, past Jupiter and Saturn and the cold outer giants, and only after decades of silence and dark did they finally pass through that invisible shore. Voyager 1 in 2012, Voyager 2 some 6 years later, and feel the warm, thin breath of the sun fall away behind them for good. They are still out there now, still moving, the most distant things our species has ever made, carrying their faint signals home across a gulf so wide that the messages, traveling at the speed of light, take most of a day to arrive. And for all that journeying, all those decades, and all those billions of kilometers, they have only just stepped past the sun's own doorstep. Everything they crossed to get there, the planets, the comets, the whole bright machinery of the solar system, was the crowded part. Ahead of them lies the real distance, the long, empty dark between the stars, which not even they, in 100,000 years of flying, will ever cross. But even the heliopause is not the true outer wall of the sun's realm. Far, far beyond it, so far that the sun would no longer warm anything there at all, lies the strangest frontier of our solar system, the Oort cloud. It is a vast, faint shell of icy bodies, billions of them, wrapped all the way around the sun and its planets, like a thin spherical mist. Its inner edge lies perhaps 1,000 times farther from the sun than the Earth. Its outer edge may reach as much as a light year away, perhaps a quarter, perhaps half, of the entire distance to the nearest other star. The scale of it defeats the imagination. Voyager 1, the most distant object human hands have ever made, would need around 300 years simply to reach the inner edge of that cloud, and perhaps 30,000 more to pass beyond its far side. And the cloud is no crowd, even so. Within it, the icy worlds drift so far apart that neighbors are separated by tens of millions of kilometers of empty dark. The Oort cloud is the sun's last whisper into the night, and it is already mostly nothing. And to fall outward through it would be the loneliest stretch of the whole solar system. There would be no sense of a cloud at all, no haze, no thickening, nothing to see in any direction but the dark and the distant, shrunken sun, no brighter now than a hard, bright star. You could travel for years among these icy worlds and never glimpse a single one. They are so few and so far apart that the cloud is a cloud only on the grandest map, and up close it is simply space. Cold, black, and all but empty, with a rare frozen wanderer drifting somewhere unseen, light days from its nearest kin. This is where the sun's long reach finally gives out. Not at a wall, not at an edge, but in a slow fading of almost nothing into nothing, so gradual that no traveler could ever say precisely where the solar system ended and the open galaxy began. On the far side of all of it, The warm, thin wind of our own star gives way to something older and colder still, the space between the stars. There, the crowding thins again. In the space between the stars, one might cross an entire cubic centimeter, no larger than the tip of a finger, and find, on average, a single atom. 1. Drifting alone in the dark, perhaps light years from its nearest neighbor. This is the medium that fills the galaxy between its suns, and by the measure of anything we have ever touched, it is a vacuum more perfect than any ever made on Earth. And our own corner of that vacuum is emptier than most. Without ever knowing it, our sun is drifting through the inside of an enormous cavity in the galaxy, a region astronomers call the local bubble, very nearly 1,000 light-years across, swept clean of much of the gas that fills the spaces between the stars. It was not always here, and the sun did not make it. Long before there were oceans on the Earth, a series of great stars in this part of the galaxy reached the ends of their lives and died as supernovae. Titanic explosions that blasted the surrounding gas outward in every direction, hollowing out a vast, low bubble in the dark. The first of those explosions went off some 14 million years ago. The sun, on its slow circuit around the galaxy, only wandered into the hollow they had carved a few million years ago, a passing traveler, not a resident, and by pure chance, very nearly at its center. The young stars being born nearest to us today are forming along the distant inner walls of that bubble, on the rim of the emptiness the dead stars left behind. So even the quiet neighborhood our sun calls home is, in truth, a hollow, a cavity carved by the deaths of older stars, with our own star merely drifting through. And it will not stay. The sun does not belong to this bubble. It is only passing across it, on the long arc of its orbit around the galaxy, the way a traveler crosses a wide clearing in a forest without ever calling it home. In some millions of years it will reach the far side and pass out again into denser country, and the great hollow will be someone else's neighborhood, or no one's at all. For the bubble itself is slowly fading, its thin walls drifting apart, on its own unhurried way to becoming nothing in particular. There is no permanence to any of it. The emptiness we happen to live inside tonight is itself only a passing arrangement of the dark, blown open by stars long dead, drifting slowly shut again, with our small, warm world carried quietly across the middle of it for a little while. And yet, this is the strange, humbling truth we will carry with us tonight. Even this is still one of the crowded places. The space between the stars, empty as it is, belongs to a galaxy, a great bright island, of a few 100 billion suns. We have not yet left the light behind. We have only stepped out the door. The real emptiness, the one that defines the universe, lies far beyond the edge of everything we have ever called home. And to reach it, we have to keep falling outward, past the last familiar star, into the dark between the galaxies themselves. So we set out, falling outward, away from the sun, toward that greater darkness. But before we can leave the galaxy behind, we have to cross the space between the stars. And it is here, on the very first leg of the journey, that the true scale of emptiness begins to reveal itself. Look up on a clear, dark night, far from any city, and the sky seems crowded with stars. A few thousand of them, scattered thickly from horizon to horizon, with the soft band of the Milky Way spilling across the middle like mist. It feels full, it feels close, it is one of the oldest illusions there is. Because those stars are not close to one another at all. They only appear gathered together because they lie so far away that distance presses them flat onto the same dark sheet of sky. In truth, each one is separated from its neighbors by gulfs so wide that the word distance begins to lose its ordinary meaning. The nearest star to our sun is called Proxima Centauri, a small dim red ember, the faint outermost member of the Alpha Centauri system, far too pale to see with the unaided eye. And it is our closest neighbor in all the galaxy. To reach it, light itself, the fastest thing there is, crossing nearly 300,000 kilometers every second, must travel for more than 4 years. 4 years and 3 months of unbroken flight at the speed of light, only to cross the gap to the single closest star. In plane units, that gap is about 40 trillion kilometers. The mind cannot hold a number like that. It simply slides off. So let the sun shrink instead. Imagine our star, more than 1 million kilometers across, reduced to a single grain of sand resting in the palm of a hand. On that scale, the Earth would be an invisible mote a few centimeters away, and the whole familiar family of planets would fit within arm's reach. And the nearest other star, Proxima, would be a second grain of sand lying more than 10 kilometers away. 2 grains of sand, separated by a journey of kilometers, and between them, across all that distance, almost perfectly nothing. That is the true texture of the galaxy. Not a crowd of stars, but a scattering of rare, lonely grains adrift in an ocean of dark. And remember, that is the close one. Hold the 2 grains of sand in mind. The sun in your palm. Proxima, 10 kilometers away across an empty country. And then understand that this is the smallest gap in the whole galaxy, the very nearest neighbor we have. Every other star is further. Pick almost any point of light in the night sky, and the same model would set its grain of sand not 10 kilometers off but 20, or 50, or 100, with nothing whatever in all the space between. The galaxy is not a beach, thick with sand underfoot. It is a few 100 billion separate grains, scattered so thinly through so enormous a dark that you could wander it for an eternity and pass almost none of them. We picture the stars as a crowd because, from down here, they fall together onto the same small dome of sky. Out there, in the real distances, they are among the most solitary things that exist. Each one burning alone, with vast empty distances on every side, calling to no one, reaching nothing. The light itself is a kind of memory, because it travels for so long to reach us. The night sky is never a picture of how the stars are, only of how they were. The glow from some of them set out years ago, from others, centuries or thousands of years ago, when the first cities were still being built. To look up is to look backward, into a past scattered across the dark, arriving only now. There is something quietly consoling in that, if you let it settle. The night sky is not a single moment at all. It is a vast, layered archive of different times, all delivered to the eye at once. The nearest stars showing themselves as they were a few years ago, the farther ones as they were before any human was born, and the faint smudge of another galaxy showing a light that left it before our kind existed. Some of the stars we can see may not even be there any longer. They may have died long ago, and only their old light is still traveling, still arriving, a glow outliving the thing that made it. To lie back and watch the stars, then, is to watch the deep past held gently in place above us. A slow rain of ancient light, each drop of it, a message from a different age, every one of them having crossed an immense reach of emptiness to reach this single quiet moment and this single pair of eyes. And out there, in the middle of the crossing, the universe would feel utterly changed. The sun, which fills our daytime sky and warms every living thing on Earth, would have dwindled to a single bright point among countless others. Still perhaps the brightest in that sky, but no longer a sun in any sense that matters. It would cast no warmth, no shadow, no light to see by. To stand on some cold wandering world halfway between the stars would be to stand in darkness in every direction, scattered with distant, motionless points of light, each one a sun far too remote to reach. And there are such worlds out there, truly, rogue planets, flung loose from their birth systems long ago, wandering the galaxy with no sun at all. A world like that drifts through a night with no morning ever coming. No dawn, no warmth rising on any horizon, no nearby fire to set the rhythm of its hours, because it has no hours. Only the cold, and the slow, slow wheeling of the distant stars, none of them ever close enough to be more than a point of light. Such a world might fall through the dark for billions of years and never once pass near enough to a star to feel its heat. And these wanderers are not some rare exception out there. The gulfs between the stars are wide enough, and the galaxy is old enough, that there may be as many of these sunless drifting worlds as there are stars that lost them. The dark between the suns is not empty of worlds, it is full of cold ones, falling endlessly through a night that never breaks, and the slowness of it. Voyager 1, the fastest object humanity has ever launched, has been flying outward for nearly 50 years, at about 17 kilometers every second. If it were aimed at Proxima Centauri, which it is not, it would still need more than 70,000 years to arrive. 70,000 years, many times the whole span of recorded human history, simply to cross from our star to the very next one. And Proxima is the close one, the easy one, the neighbor at the door. Beyond it, the stars only spread further apart, across most of the galaxy. 5 light-years or more between one point of light and the next, tens of trillions of kilometers of empty space each time. And the galaxy they are scattered through is itself almost beyond picturing. Our Milky Way is a slowly turning wheel of light about 100,000 light-years from edge to edge. So wide that a beam of light, for all its speed, needs 1,000 centuries to cross from one side to the other. Our own sun lies far from the center, some 26,000 light-years out, adrift in the quiet outskirts, midway along one of the great spiral arms. And those arms, bright as they look in any picture of a galaxy, are not solid bands of stars. They are faint concentrations, with wide, dim, half-empty lanes between them, so that even the wheel of the galaxy is mostly the dark spaces between its glowing spokes. The galaxy we belong to holds a few 100 billion stars, and it is one of the crowded places in the universe. And yet, to wander through it from star to star, the overwhelming experience would not be of stars at all. It would be of the dark between them, the long, cold, silent reaches where there is no world, no warmth, no light close enough to matter. The stars are the exceptions. The emptiness is the rule, written across the entire width of the galaxy. And it remains the rule even where the galaxy seems most thronged. Fall inward, toward the bright bulge at the very center of the Milky Way, and the stars do gather closer, packed thousands of times more densely than they are out here in our quiet suburb. Yet even there, in the most crowded room in all the galaxy, the stars are still separated by light weeks and light months of empty space. They do not touch, they do not collide, they only swarm a little nearer together. And at the exact heart of it sits something stranger than any star, a point of such impossible density that not even light can climb back out of it. A black hole, some 4 million times the mass of the Sun, drawn down into a region no larger than the orbits of the inner planets, with the closest stars whipping around it at a fair fraction of the speed of light. It gives off no light of its own. The very center of our galaxy, the pivot the whole vast wheel turns around, is a thing of perfect darkness. And around all of it, the black heart, the bright bulge, the great flat wheel of the arms, lies the part of the galaxy least often pictured, and by far the largest, the halo. It is an immense near-empty sphere of space, reaching out well beyond the bright disk in every direction, and through it drift only a few hundred ancient globular clusters, tight, glittering knots of the galaxy's oldest stars, and a thin scattering of lone outliers, all of them moving through a darkness so deep and so vacant that a traveler crossing it might pass nothing whatever for tens of thousands of years. The bright wheel we call our galaxy hangs inside that dark sphere, like a single luminous coin dropped into an unlit cathedral, and the whole of it turns with a terrible slowness. Our sun, carried along in the outer reaches, is not still. It sweeps around the distant galactic center at well over 200 kilometers every second. And even at that speed, a single circuit of the galaxy takes something like 200 million years. The last time the sun was where it is tonight, the first dinosaurs were only beginning. The galaxy is vast enough that its own turning is measured against the ages of life on Earth. crowded and emptier still and slow beyond all feeling. It is the same answer at every door we open. And still, even here, even lost in the immense dark between the stars, we have not truly left home. All of this, every lonely grain of light, every trillion-kilometer gulf, lies inside a single galaxy, one bright island among the islands. To find the real emptiness, the kind that swallows galaxies whole, we have to do something stranger still. We have to leave the island entirely and look back at it from the outside. And so we rise, up and out of the bright, crowded disk of the Milky Way, climbing above the spiral arms until the whole galaxy falls away beneath us and resolves at last into a single object. From far enough out, our entire galaxy, every star ever named, every world, that whole swarm of a few 100 billion suns, with our own sun and Earth lost somewhere in one of its faint outer arms, becomes nothing more than a soft pinwheel of light hanging in the dark. An island. And the moment it becomes an island, a new question opens beneath it. What lies in the water all around? Let the size of that shift settle for a moment. A moment ago, the galaxy was everything. 100,000 light-years of stars, more suns than anyone could count in 100 lifetimes. The entire stage on which every story we have told tonight has played out. And now, from out here it is a single soft smudge of light you could cover with a fingertip held at arm's length. Everything that has ever happened to anyone. Every life, every ocean, every war and song and quiet evening, the whole of human history and all the long ages of life before it. All of it took place inside that one small glimmer, on one grain of one outer arm, too faint from here to pick out at all. And the dark around it does not end a little way off. It is the new ocean we are about to cross, and it makes the dark between the stars look like a crowded harbor. We have left the island. Now we look out at the water. The answer is a kind of emptiness that makes everything before it seem cluttered. The nearest large galaxy beyond our own is the great spiral of Andromeda. It is the most distant thing the human eye can see unaided. A faint smudge of light on a dark night, and the glow now reaching us left Andromeda about 2.5 million years ago, before our species existed. To cross that gap is to cross some 15 quintillion miles, 15, followed by 18 zeros, of almost perfect nothing. Go outside on a clear, dark night if you ever can, and find that faint smudge for yourself. It looks like nothing much. A soft gray blur, easy to miss, dimmer than many a single star. But that blur is an entire galaxy. 1 trillion suns, gathered into one slow wheel of light, the largest thing the naked eye can reach. And the light landing on your eye in that instant is older than humanity. It left Andromeda when our ancestors were not yet ourselves, and it crossed 2.5 million years of empty dark, falling the whole way through a near-perfect nothing, to arrive at last, faint and patient, on a single night, in a single eye. To see Andromeda at all is to catch a message in a bottle that was thrown into the void before there were any people to throw it, and to be the first thing it has touched in all that time. And it is emptier than the space between the stars by a margin that defies the imagination. Between the stars of our galaxy, a fingertip of space held, on average, a single atom. In the space between the galaxies, that same lone atom is spread thin across a full cubic meter, roughly the volume of a small chair. Intergalactic space is something close to 1 million times emptier than the already unimaginable emptiness between the stars. To hang suspended halfway between Andromeda and the Milky Way would be to float with a faint pinwheel of light on one side, another faint pinwheel on the other, and in every remaining direction nothing at all. No star, no world, no warmth, across distances that light itself needs 1 million years and more to cross. Hold there a moment, in that imagined place between the galaxies, and let the silence of it settle. There is no wind, because there is almost nothing left to move. There is no sound, and there never has been, and there never will be. There is no up and no down, and nothing near enough to fall toward in any span a human heart could measure. The two faint pinwheels hang motionless to either side, so far off that an entire lifetime could pass, and they would not seem to shift at all. The cold is the deep, even cold of space itself, only a few degrees above the lowest temperature there is. And the dark is not the friendly dark of a night on Earth, with its scattered stars and its sense of a sky overhead. It is a dark that runs equally in every direction, unbroken, unhurried, complete. To be there would not be frightening, exactly. It is too vast, and too quiet for fear. It would be something closer to stillness, the stillness of a place that has rested in perfect calm for longer than the Earth has existed, and will go on resting long after the Earth is gone. And this, not the warm, crowded surface of a living world, is the ordinary condition of the universe. A measureless, motionless dark, with the rare faint islands of light suspended impossibly far apart, keeping their slow and distant company across the emptiness. And yet, astonishingly, the galaxies are not scattered at random through that dark. They are gathered. Andromeda and the Milky Way are not strangers passing in the night. They belong to the same small family. The local group, a loose company of some 80 galaxies, most of them faint dwarfs, drifting together and held by their own gravity. And the local group, in turn, is only a single thread of something far greater. Step back a little further, and our small family is revealed to sit within a wider, flattened arrangement of galaxy groups that astronomers call the local sheet. A broad, thin plane of galaxies drifting together through the dark, with the great hollow of the local void opening just to one side of it. And the sheet, in its turn, lies out near the edge of a far richer gathering, the Virgo cluster, the nearest truly large cluster of galaxies to our own, a swarm of well over 1,000 galaxies, bound tightly together by their shared gravity, tens of millions of light-years off in the direction of the constellation that gives it its name. The Virgo cluster is massive enough that its pull reaches all the way out to us. Our entire local group is slowly, gently falling toward it, drawn across the emptiness by a crowd of galaxies we will never reach. And even Virgo is not the summit. Denser clusters still hang in the deeper dark. Among them the Coma cluster, that same vast swarm in which the unseen weight of dark matter first betrayed itself, gripping thousands of galaxies far more tightly than their visible stars could ever explain. Cluster upon cluster, group upon group, each one a rare bright knot strung in a far larger dark, and all of them, our own among them, sliding along the same vast invisible currents. For when astronomers traced the slow drift of the galaxies around us, not just where they sit, but which way they are moving, they found that our local group, and thousands of galaxies beyond it, are all sliding together in the same direction, like leaves carried on one wide invisible current. Follow that current outward, and it belongs to a single immense structure, a supercluster of perhaps 100,000 galaxies, mapped and named only a little over a decade ago. They called it Laniakea, a word from the Hawaiian for immense heaven. It stretches more than 500 million light-years from side to side, and the Milky Way lies far out near its edge, on the outermost shore of it. Laniakea is not held together like a solid thing. It is defined by that flow, by the fact that everything within it is falling, ever so slowly, toward the same distant place. And at the bottom of the flow, drawing it all inward, is a region so dense, and so nearly hidden behind the glare of our own galaxy's disk, that for years no one could say what it was. They simply called it the Great Attractor, an unseen weight, a few 100 million light-years off, toward which our entire supercluster has been quietly drifting all along. It is a strange thing to sit with, lying still in the dark, that nothing here is still at all. The Earth turns and circles the sun sweeps around the galaxy falls through the local group toward Andromeda. The whole local group streams across Laniakea toward that hidden weight, and Laniakea itself drifts through the deeper dark, pushed and pulled by emptiness and crowds far larger still. At this very moment, without the faintest sensation of speed, You are being carried through the cosmos at hundreds of kilometers every second, along currents set in motion before the Earth was born. We feel none of it. There is nothing nearby to measure it against. No wall to rush past, no wind in the face, only the vast smooth dark, through which everything moves together, and so nothing seems to move at all. The stillness of a quiet night is, in truth, one of the swiftest journeys imaginable. The whole of the heavens, and you with them, falling silently through the emptiness toward places no one will ever arrive. And when astronomers pulled back far enough to map the positions of millions of galaxies, an extraordinary pattern rose out of the dark. The galaxies are not spread evenly, like sand poured across a floor. They are strung together, drawn into long glowing threads and vast curving walls and dense bright knots, all of it woven into a single immense structure that reaches across the entire visible universe. They call it the cosmic web. Seen whole, it looks less like a scattering of stars and more like something alive, a tangle of filaments and bridges, like the threads of a spider's web, or the branching of nerves, or the fine delicate framework of a sponge. It is, by some measure, the largest pattern that exists, the single grandest shape the universe has drawn for itself, and it took on that shape entirely on its own, with no hand to guide it, over billions of patient years. Run the great surveys forward in your mind, and you can almost watch it grow, matter, gathering along the lines of its own faint unevenness, the bright threads thickening as galaxies stream along them toward the glowing knots where the threads cross, and the rounded dark spaces between the threads swelling wider and emptier with every age. The galaxies do not sit still within it. They drift, slowly, like beads of dew migrating along the strands of a web toward the points where the strands meet. Everything luminous in all of creation is strung along those bright lines and gathered at those bright crossings. And the lines themselves, for all their reach across the whole visible universe, are thin, gossamer thin, against the dark rounded hollows they enclose. The web is the most beautiful thing the cosmos has made. It is also, almost entirely, the boundary of its own emptiness. A bright skin drawn taut over an overwhelming dark. We learn to see it slowly. The first hint came near the end of the last century, when two astronomers, Margaret Geller and John Hutra, set out to measure the distances to thousands of galaxies in one patch of sky and build the first true three-dimensional map of where they lay. What rose out of their data was not a scattering, but a structure. An enormous sheet of galaxies, strung edge to edge across more than 500 million light-years, which they called the Great Wall. It was the first time anyone had seen, plainly, that the universe has a texture, that galaxies gather along thin walls and bright filaments, and that those walls curve around vast, dark, rounded hollows, like the film of a soap bubble drawn around the empty space inside. Later surveys mapping deeper and wider found walls greater still, among them the Sloan Great Wall, a chain of galaxies stretching well over 1 billion light-years from end to end, one of the largest structures ever charted in all of creation. And there are hints of architecture greater even than that, so great it strains what the universe is thought to allow. The most extreme of them, traced not by galaxies themselves but by the distant flares of dying stars scattered across half the sky, has been called the Hercules Corona Borealis Great Wall, a possible gathering of matter so immense that light would need something on the order of 10 billion years to cross it, very nearly the whole age of the universe. Whether it is truly a single structure, or only a pattern conjured by incomplete maps, is still fiercely argued, for by the deepest rules of cosmology, nothing should be permitted to grow so large. But that the question can even be raised is itself the lesson. The framework of the cosmos runs to scales that drain the word large of all meaning, sheets and walls of galaxies drawn across appreciable fractions of everything that is, but the lesson was already set the moment the first wall appeared. The bright places are sheets and threads and knots, and they are wrapped around emptiness. Every galaxy, every island of suns, our own among them, rides on the bright threads of that web. They line the glowing filaments, and gather at the knots where filaments cross. This is where nearly all the light in the universe lives, strung along the edges of an enormous, invisible scaffolding. And that scaffolding is invisible in a way far stranger than mere distance. For when astronomers weigh the galaxies, measuring how fast they spin, how strongly the great clusters pull on one another, how their gravity bends the light of more distant things passing behind them, they find far more pull than there is anything to see. The stars, the glowing gas, every shining thing the eye or the telescope can gather, account for only a small part of the mass that must be present. The rest, the overwhelming majority of it, gives off no light at all. It does not glow, or reflect, or cast a shadow. We have never once seen it directly, and we still do not know what it is. They call it dark matter, and there is something like 6 times as much of it as there is of all the ordinary, shining stuff in the universe combined. The first hint came almost a century ago, when an astronomer named Fritz Ricci weighed a great swarm of galaxies called the Coma Cluster, and found it moving far too fast to hold itself together on the gravity of its visible stars alone. Something unseen had to be gripping it. He was right, and the mystery has only deepened in every decade since. So the bright web that seems, from far enough away, to be the very substance of the cosmos, is in truth only a fine tracery of light, laid over a vast invisible frame. And even that frame is a minority of all there is. Add up everything that shines, every star, every world, every glowing cloud across the whole observable universe, and it comes to barely a 20th of the total. The rest is darkness we can measure but cannot see. We do not merely live in a mostly empty universe. We live in a mostly invisible one, clinging to the thin-lit edge of something we can scarcely perceive at all. But a web is mostly holes. And this is the quiet turn the cosmic web asks us to face. The bright filaments. Every galaxy, every star, every world, every living thing that has ever existed, trace only the thinnest framework, like surface tension drawn over bubbles. The vast, dark, rounded spaces enclosed between the threads, the hollows in the foam, the holes in the web, are larger than everything else combined. They are the cosmic voids, rounded emptinesses tens, even hundreds of millions of light-years across. Most of the universe by far is not galaxies, and not even the thin gas drifting between them. Most of the universe is the great empty interior of the web. And it is into one of those hollows, the deepest and most desolate ever found, that we are about to descend. But before we fall all the way down into that deepest hollow, it is worth pausing a moment at its rim, because the cosmic voids are stranger, and far closer to home, than they first appear. Begin with what a void truly is. It is not a hole in the sense of a tear, or a place where space itself runs out. Space is still there, still woven from the same fabric as everywhere else. A void is simply a region where the cosmic web has almost nothing strung across it. A vast, rounded hollow between the bright filaments, swept nearly clean of galaxies. A single void may stretch tens, even hundreds of millions of light-years from one side to the other. And inside it, where an ordinary stretch of the universe might hold dozens or hundreds of galaxies, there may be only a scattered few, or none that any eye could ever find. And these hollows are not the exception, they are the overwhelming majority. If the glowing filaments of galaxies are the framework of the universe, then the voids are everything that framework encloses, and by the best estimates, they make up the great bulk of all space, perhaps as much as 80% of the volume of the cosmos. It helps to picture the whole of it as a great cosmic foam, countless bubbles pressed together, their thin shared walls glittering with galaxies, and the hollow interiors of the bubbles holding almost nothing at all. The largest of those bubbles can approach 1 billion light-years across single, continuous emptinesses so wide that light itself, for all its speed, would need close to 1 billion years merely to cross from one rim to the other. We live our entire lives inside the thin bright film, The vast quiet interiors are a country we almost never think about, and yet that country is most of the universe. And astronomers have begun to chart those hollows one by one, the way old explorers slowly filled in the blank interiors of the continents. A void cannot be photographed. There is nothing inside it to catch the light, so it must be mapped from its edges, by measuring the distances to many thousands of galaxies, and watching for the regions where the galaxies thin out and simply stop. Where the maps fall empty, a void is named. There is the local void, opening almost at our own doorstep, which we will come to in a moment. There is a vast hollow in the direction of the constellation Eridanus, among the largest underdense regions ever charted. There are giant voids stitched between the bright walls in very nearly every direction the great surveys have reached, so many and so large that for the astronomer mapping the deep sky, the harder question is not where the voids lie, but how, in all that emptiness, the thin bright walls ever manage to gather at all. The more carefully we look, the more the universe shows itself to be a thing made chiefly of its hollows, a structure whose true substance is the spaces between, with the glittering walls a kind of afterthought drawn around them. There is even a faint chance that the very oldest light in existence still carries the imprint of one of these hollows. Spread across the whole sky is a soft, even glow left over from the universe's first moments, the afterglow of its fiery beginning, grown cold and faint over billions of years. In one direction, that ancient glow is very slightly colder than everywhere else, a patch of extra chill in the dawn light of creation. And in that same direction lies one of the largest underdense regions ever charted. Some astronomers have wondered whether the great emptiness is what cooled the light as it passed through, though whether the two are truly linked is still debated, and far from settled. It is only a possibility, a question mark hanging over the maps, but it is a haunting one, that an emptiness could be so vast it leaves a fingerprint on the oldest light there is. Now imagine what it would mean to live inside one of these hollows. A galaxy adrift in the heart of a great void would be almost unbearably alone. Its own stars would still wheel overhead. Its own suns would still rise and set on whatever worlds it carried. But beyond them, the sky would be nearly bare. No neighboring galaxies close enough to shine. No soft companions hanging in the dark. Just one island of light, and then nothing, reaching outward for 100 million years of traveling light in every direction before the next faint smudge appeared. Astronomers have found such galaxies, stranded alone in the middle of the great voids, and there are few lonelier addresses in all of creation. And here is the part that is easy to keep at a comfortable distance, and should not be. We are not merely looking in upon these voids from some safe and luminous vantage. We live among them. It is tempting to imagine the great hollows as something far off, a feature of the deep cosmos we are studying from the outside, the way one might study a distant country on a map. But we are not outside them. We are in the country. The voids are not a remote province of the universe. They are the universe, the ordinary fabric of it, and our small bright neighborhood is stitched right into the scene between them. Look in one direction and the nearest great hollow opens a stone's throw away, in cosmic terms, its emptiness already shaping how our galaxy moves. We did not arrive here from somewhere fuller. There is nowhere fuller to have come from. The bright rim of the web that we call home has the dark on every side of it, near and far, and always has. Just beyond our own small local group lies one of these hollows, the local void, a great emptiness well over 100 million light-years across, opening almost on our doorstep. Our galaxy sits near its edge, on the bright rim of the web, with that enormous darkness yawning out to one side. And the void is not idle. As it expands, swept ever emptier, it gently pushes everything along its rim outward, away from the hollow. And the Milky Way is among the things being pushed. In a slow and constant way, we are drifting away from a vast nearby nothing that no eye can see, and that gentle nudge from a neighboring hollow turns out to be only the smallest part of the story. On a far grander scale, our entire local group is being carried across the universe at hundreds of kilometers every second, and for a long time the reason was a puzzle. There was a known crowd of galaxies pulling us in one direction, a distant concentration so rich it draws everything around it inward. But the pull alone did not add up. Only recently did astronomers find the other half of the answer, by mapping not where galaxies are, but where they are not. Directly opposite that great attracting crowd on the far side of the sky lies a vast region emptier than its surroundings, and it appears to be pushing us away. They named it the dipole repeller. An underdensity pushes, it turns out, just as surely as a crowd of galaxies pulls. The emptiness is not passive at all, so our true motion through the cosmos is the sum of the two, pulled from one side by a distant gathering of galaxies, and pushed from the other by a great hollow of near nothing, the two working together, in almost equal measure, to carry us silently along. We do not only live beside the emptiness, we are being moved by it, and it may run deeper still. For years, some astronomers have suggested that our galaxy lies not merely beside a void, but within one, a far larger, gentler underdensity sometimes called the KBC void, perhaps 1 billion or 2 light-years across, where the galaxies thin to some 20% below the cosmic average. If they are right, then our Sun, our Earth, our entire local group, and thousands of galaxies beyond, have spent their whole existence inside a great cosmic hollow, not far from its center, a region quietly emptier than the universe at large, a faint thinning in the dark that we have never felt and could never see, but that has been our home address all along. The idea is still debated, still unproven. The maps are not yet sharp enough to settle it. But it leaves a strange possibility hanging in the quiet, that emptiness is not only the destination of our journey tonight, it may also be the place we set out from, that we have been inside the hollow from the very beginning, looking out from one faint thinning toward a deeper one, and calling the whole arrangement home. And yet, the local void at our shoulder, the wide, gentle hollows that may surround us, even the great repeller pushing at our backs, these are ordinary emptinesses. Common, almost crowded in their quiet way, beside the one place we have been traveling toward all along, for somewhere far out in the dark, beyond our own modest corner of the web, there is a single void that stands apart from almost every other, one of the largest and the most famously desolate ever found. It is so vast and so empty that for years astronomers could scarcely believe it was real. And it is there at last that we are ready to arrive. And so, at last, we arrive. High in the northern sky, in the direction of a quiet constellation the ancients called Boötes, the herdsman, there is a region of space, unlike almost any other. It has no true name of its own, only a description that hardened into a title over the years, the Boötes Void, the Great Void. To the eye, that patch of sky looks like any other, a scattering of foreground stars, and the same calm black as everywhere else. But those stars belong to our own galaxy, close at hand. Look past them, far past them, hundreds of millions of light-years into the dark, and something extraordinary comes into focus by its sheer absence. It was found in 1981 by the astronomer Robert Kirshner and his colleagues, who were not hunting for emptiness at all. They were mapping the distances to galaxies in that part of the sky, charting how the universe was filled. And where they expected galaxy after galaxy stretching away into the depths, they found instead a great gap in the data, a yawning hole where the galaxies simply stopped. At first it seemed too empty to be real, but the more carefully they looked, the more the emptiness held. Later surveys returned to the same patch of sky with sharper instruments, expecting the hole to fill in as the maps improved. It did not. A few scattered galaxies turned up inside it over the years, but only a handful, lost in a volume that should have held a multitude, and their loneliness only made the void stranger than before. Dwell for a moment on how strange a thing that was to find. The astronomers had not gone looking for a hole. They had gone looking for galaxies, expecting the patient, ordinary scatter that fills the sky everywhere else. A galaxy here, a cluster there, the familiar grain of the cosmos repeating outward into the depths. Instead, across a reach of the heavens hundreds of millions of light-years deep, the grain simply failed. Not thinned, not dimmed, failed, as though a great bite had been taken out of the universe and nothing left behind to mark where it had been. For a time, the most natural assumption was that something must be wrong, that the instruments were missing the galaxies, that the survey was incomplete, that the hole would quietly close as the maps grew sharper. It did not close. Year by year, telescope by telescope, the emptiness was confirmed and confirmed again, until there was no honest way left to deny it. There was simply a place in the cosmos, vast beyond easy picturing, where the universe had forgotten to put almost anything at all. And once a thing like that is real, it changes the shape of every question that comes after. The voids, it turns out, are not flaws in an otherwise full creation. They are far too large, and far too many, and far too empty for that. The fuller our map of the universe becomes, the plainer it grows that the hollows were always the greater part, and that the Boötes Void is only the deepest, clearest example of what the cosmos was quietly doing everywhere else. The Boötes Void is a roughly spherical region close to 330 million light-years across. That number is hard to feel, so set it against the journey already behind us. The gulf to Andromeda, a distance whose mileage broke the imagination, would fit across this single void more than 100 times over. Light itself, crossing 300,000 kilometers every second, needs around 330 million years just to travel from one side of the hollow to the other, longer than the whole age of the dinosaurs, from their first rise to their final day. And this enormous bubble of near nothing lies some 700 million light-years away, close enough in cosmic terms to be a neighbor, far enough that its light set out long before there were any creatures here to receive it. It is one of the largest and by far the most famous of all the empty places ever found. Sit with that span for a moment, because the mind keeps trying to shrink it back to something manageable, and it will not shrink. 330 million light-years is not a distance the imagination can walk across. If you began at one edge traveling at the speed of light, the absolute limit, the speed at which the messages of the whole universe are carried, you would cross the gap to the moon in a little over a second, and the entire breadth of our own galaxy in 100,000 years. And you would still need to keep going at that same impossible speed for more than 300 million years, just to reach the far side of this single hollow. And in all of that crossing, through all those hundreds of millions of years of flight, you would pass almost nothing at all. A galaxy here perhaps, after tens of millions of years of dark, and then nothing again, and then nothing, and then nothing. The Boötes Void is not a gap in the scenery. It is a scale of emptiness the universe keeps in quiet reserve, far larger than anything our lives have prepared us to feel, and it is only one of many. But it is not the size of the Boötes Void that unsettles astronomers, it is what is missing from it. In a region of that volume, filled at the ordinary density of the cosmos, there should be something like 2,000 galaxies, 2,000 bright islands of suns, each holding its own 100 billion stars. When astronomers counted what was truly there, they found around 60 galaxies, scattered so thinly through a space so immense that they are all but lost within it. Imagine emptying a great city of every soul but a few dozen, and leaving those few to wander streets that run for hundreds of miles between them, never meeting, never once glimpsing another light in a far window. That is the Boötes Void, a hollow so deep that even the galaxies inside it are strangers to one another. Hold the comparison a little longer, because it is hard to keep in focus. Where the universe should have set down 2,000 galaxies, it set down 60. Not 2,000 stars, or 2,000 worlds. 2,000 galaxies, each one a Milky Way in its own right, each holding its own few 100 billion suns, its own quiet rooms of empty space between them. All of that, almost entirely absent, across a region so wide that light needs hundreds of millions of years merely to cross it. The few dozen galaxies that are there are spread so thinly that one of them might shine for the whole of its existence, without its light ever reaching another. A galaxy at the center would have no near neighbor at all, nothing within 100 million light-years and more, in any direction it cared to look. It is not a quiet town. It is a continent with a handful of solitary lamps burning hundreds of miles apart, each one alone, with its own small circle of light and an ocean of dark in every direction beyond it. And the most unsettling part is not how strange that is. It is how ordinary, how the void is only doing, more completely, what the whole universe does everywhere, gathering its little light into rare bright knots and leaving almost everything else as dark. Drift into the middle of it, and the loneliness would be total in a way nothing in our own sky can teach. No Milky Way arching overhead in glory, no Andromeda smudge to find on a clear night, no soft companions anywhere at all. Whatever galaxy carried you would hang alone in a darkness that ran unbroken for 100 million light-years and more, before the faintest neighbor appeared. The void does not roar, and it does not threaten. It is silent, and still, and patient. It is simply the largest quiet there is. And here, the emptiness becomes something stranger than any statistic. Consider what the sky would look like from a world near the center of that void. The night would be almost perfectly bare. A civilization arising there would watch their own galaxy's stars wheel overhead as we do. But beyond that single island of suns, they would find almost nothing. The nearest other galaxies would lie so far off and shine so faintly that no early telescope could ever have revealed them. Through the whole of such a people's history, every myth, every map of the heavens, every long argument about the size of creation, the most reasonable conclusion would be that their galaxy was the entire universe. One lonely light, surrounded by infinite, featureless dark. They might build instruments for generations before the first faint hint arrived that they were not alone. That there were other islands out there after all, merely too distant to see. We, on our crowded rim of the web, learned the universe was full of galaxies within a single human lifetime. A people born in the heart of the Boötes Void might have waited far, far longer to discover they were not the only thing that had ever existed. The emptiness would not only surround them, it would quietly shape what they believed was possible. And perhaps the most haunting part is that nothing made this void. No force carved it, no catastrophe blew it clear. It is simply what happens when the universe is left alone long enough. In the first instance after the Big Bang, the matter of the cosmos was spread almost, but not quite evenly. There were faint ripples in it, regions a shade denser, regions a shade thinner, no louder than whispers of unevenness. And gravity, patient beyond all measure, spent the next 13 billion years amplifying those whispers. The slightly denser regions drew in more and more matter, swelling into the filaments and the bright clusters of galaxies. The slightly thinner regions did the opposite, slowly surrendering what little they held, their matter draining outward toward the denser walls around them, leaving them emptier with every passing age. The Boötes Void may even be several smaller voids that grew until they merged into one. The Great Hollow is not a wound in the universe. It is the universe quietly finishing what it began. Emptiness deepening into deeper emptiness, only because it started a fraction emptier than the rest. There is something almost unbearably patient in that. No hand reached in to scoop the void out. No explosion cleared it. No catastrophe emptied it in a moment. It was made the way water finds its level, by nothing but time, and the faint, relentless preference of matter for matter. A region that began, in the universe's first moments, a mere shade emptier than its surroundings, had slightly less gravity to hold the little it carried. So it surrendered some of that to its denser neighbors, which left it emptier still, which loosened its grip further, which let yet more drain away. And on, for 13 billion years, the rich growing richer, and the empty growing emptier, until a faint early thinness had widened into a hollow 300 million light-years across. The Boötes Void is not the site of any disaster. It is the simple, slow arithmetic of gravity, run for the whole age of the universe. And the same arithmetic is running everywhere, in every hollow in the sky, quietly and without end. The bright places drawing themselves tighter and brighter, the empty places draining themselves wider and darker, the cosmos sorting itself, with infinite patience, into light and into nothing. The void is not something that happened to the universe. It is something the universe is still doing, to itself, everywhere, even tonight. And consider how late the light came and how briefly it has burned, for there was an age, a long one, when the universe held no light at all. In the beginning it was too hot and too dense for anything but a roiling fog of particles, opaque, blinding, impenetrable. Only after some 400,000 years did it cool enough for the first whole atoms to form, and the fog to clear. And what it cleared into was not brightness, but a vast, smooth, featureless dark. A cold sea of hydrogen gas, even from end to end, with not a single star anywhere within it to break the black. This was the cosmic dark ages, and they did not last for years, but for something on the order of 100 million of them, a stretch of time longer than the whole reign of the dinosaurs, with the entire cosmos lying silent and unlit, no sun, no galaxy, no single point of light in all of creation. And through that long darkness, gravity was patiently at work on the invisible frame. The dark matter, untroubled by light, had already begun to gather, drawing itself slowly into a faint web of denser threads and emptier hollows. The first rough draft of the cosmic web, drawn before there was any light to see it by. And into the densest knots of that scaffolding the ordinary gas at last began to fall, pooling, compressing, growing hotter and denser at the centers, until, somewhere past that first 100 million years, the very first stars caught fire, and light returned to the universe for the first time since its birth. Everything bright that has ever existed traces back to that moment. The first stars, kindled along the densest seams of the dark web, and from them, the first galaxies, and the long, slow gathering of the bright cosmos we have crossed tonight. The light is not the foundation of the universe. It is a late arrival. A thin flame struck in a dark that had already reigned alone for an age, and that still surrounds it on every side. Try to picture that first dawn. For 100 million years and more, the whole universe is a single unbroken dark. No star, no flame, no glimmer, anywhere across all the breadth of creation. Only the cold hydrogen and the gathering, invisible frame. And then somewhere, in the densest knot of one of those first dark filaments, the gas at the center grows hot enough and dense enough that it catches, and the very first star ignites, and for the first time since the beginning, there is light in the universe. One point of it, alone, in a dark larger than anything we can hold in the mind. Then another, and another scattered along the dark threads, and slowly, over millions upon millions of years, the first galaxies kindle and gather, and the long night of the cosmos gives way, here and there, to the scattered fires we still see burning tonight. It was not a sudden sunrise. It was the slow, patient lighting of a few rare lamps in an endless dark hall. And that dark hall was here first, and is here still, pressed close around every lamp that was ever lit. And the deepening is not over, for the universe itself is still growing. Not into anything, but within itself, every distance slowly stretching wider with the passing of time. And that stretching is not winding down, as you might expect, but speeding up, driven by something astronomers can measure but cannot yet explain, and have named, for want of a better word, dark energy. It is the dominant thing in the cosmos now, more than 2/3 of all there is, and it took the reins only a few billion years ago. If it goes on as it appears to today, then the future of the universe is a future of widening emptiness. The galaxies beyond our own small local group will be carried away from us faster and faster, their light stretched thinner and dimmer, until, across spans of time that make the age of the dinosaurs seem an eye blink, they slip one by one beyond the farthest edge that any light could ever cross to reach us. In something like 100 billion years, a watcher on whatever our galaxy has by then become would look out into the night and find the space beyond their own island of stars simply empty. No other galaxies anywhere, no smudge of Andromeda, no distant web. The rest of creation having quietly receded into an unreachable dark, taking the evidence of its own crowded youth with it. Recent measurements have begun, gently, to question whether the acceleration will truly continue forever. The final chapter is not yet written, but the direction is plain enough to feel. The light came late, and it does not gather closer with time. It scatters, and dims, and grows more alone. Emptiness is not only what the universe is, it may be what the universe is slowly, patiently becoming. And the emptying does not stop at the vanishing of the distant galaxies. Look far enough ahead, and even the stars themselves run out. We live in what astronomers sometimes call the age of stars. A brief, bright chapter in which the galaxies still spin new suns out of their stores of gas. But the gas is finite. In some tens of billions of years, perhaps a little more, the last clouds will have been spent. The last new stars will have formed and burned and died. And the great galaxies will fade from blazing wheels of light into dim, cooling embers. White dwarfs guttering slowly toward black. The faint red coals of the smallest stars outlasting all the rest before they too wink out. After them comes an immensity of time with no starlight in it at all. A long, cold age in which only the dead remnants drift on, and then a longer one still, across which even those come slowly apart, and the black holes themselves, the last structures left standing, dissolve away over spans of years so vast that the numbers stop meaning anything to anyone. What remains, at the far end of everything, is very nearly pure emptiness. A thin, cold, all but featureless dark, stretched ever wider, lit by nothing. We will not be there, and the timescales are so enormous that the mind can get no grip on them at all. But the shape of the story is plain enough. The universe had a long dark beginning, a brief bright middle, and a far longer dark end. The light is the exception, a short flame struck between two immensities of night. And all of it, every scale we have fallen through tonight, the empty atom and the dark between the planets, the gulfs between the stars and the deeper gulfs between the galaxies, the cosmic web and the great voids, and the Boötes hollow at the bottom of them. All of it is only the part we are able to see, for there is a limit to seeing. Light is swift, but it is not infinitely swift, and the universe is not infinitely old, so there is a distance beyond which light has simply not had the time to reach us since the beginning, and beyond which we cannot look, however perfect our instruments become. That limit is our horizon, and the bubble of space inside it. Everything we could ever, even in principle, observe, measures something like 93 billion light-years from one side to the other. It sounds like the edge of everything. It is not. It is only the edge of our seeing. Beyond it, the universe goes on. We have every reason to believe. The same filaments and the same hollows repeating outward, perhaps without any end at all, an emptiness with no far shore. We have traveled tonight to the emptiest place we are able to find. We have not traveled to the edge of the emptiness. There may be no edge to find. So this is the place we set out to find. A bubble of near-perfect nothing, 300 million light-years wide, where 2,000 galaxies should hang and only 60 do. A darkness so complete that a mind born within it might never have suspected the rest of the cosmos was there at all. We have fallen the whole way down, from the empty space inside a single atom to the emptiest great hollow in the known universe. And it has been the same answer, hasn't it? At every scale. We began with the empty room inside an atom, and found that the solid world is mostly nothing. We rose past the thin skin of the air, into the near vacuum around our world, and out past the planets scattered like a few seeds in a great dark hall, past the heliopause and the faint shell of the Oort cloud, and found the sun's whole realm to be mostly emptiness. We crossed the immense gulfs between the stars, 2 grains of sand kilometers apart, and found the galaxy itself to be mostly the dark between its suns, and most of even that, invisible. We left the galaxy behind, and saw it shrink to a single smudge in a far greater dark, and found the space between the galaxies 1,000,000 times emptier still. We traced the bright web and saw that it is mostly the holes. We fell into the deepest of those holes, and found the Boötes Void. We looked back across the deep past to an age with no light at all, and forward into a future emptying toward the same. At every single step, behind every bright and crowded thing, the same vast quiet was waiting. And now, having arrived, there is only one question left to sit with. The question this entire long descent was always moving toward. Not how empty the universe is, but what it means that emptiness, and not light, is what the universe is mostly made of. So here is the verdict at the end of the long descent. The quiet, strange truth the Boötes Void has been holding for us all along. The void is not a flaw in the universe. It is not a wound or a mistake or a place where something went wrong. It is the universe being most fully itself. Everything we have crossed tonight, the empty space inside the atom, the dark between the planets, the vast reaches between the stars, the deeper dark between the galaxies, the great hollows of the cosmic web, and the Boötes Void at the bottom of it all, points to a single conclusion. Emptiness is not the exception in the cosmos. Emptiness is the rule. Light and warmth and matter and life are the rare and delicate exceptions. A thin, bright film stretched over an ocean of nothing so wide that all the bright places gathered together would scarcely stain it. We do not feel it, of course. We never could. We were made on the bright film, by the bright film, for the bright film. Our whole sense of what is normal was built in the one rare kind of place, where there is ground underfoot, and air to breathe, and a warm star overhead. So the emptiness feels to us like the strange thing, the exception, the surprising fact to be marveled at, when in truth, it is the other way around entirely. The dark is the ordinary, the dark is what there mostly is. The warm, lit, crowded world we take for granted is the rarest and least likely condition the universe ever produces, and it has produced it in only the thinnest scattering of places, for only the briefest spans of time. We are not looking out from the normal place at a strange dark cosmos. We are the strange thing, the brief, bright, improbable exception, looking out for a little while at what is overwhelmingly, patiently, and almost everywhere the case. There is a way of hearing that which is genuinely vertiginous. Everything that has ever mattered to anyone. Every face, every city, every song, every quiet evening has happened on that thin film. All of it clings to the glowing threads of the web, while the overwhelming majority of all that exists is simply dark and silent and empty, and always was, and always will be. Set against the Boötes Void, the whole human story is a single spark, struck once, in a cathedral of dark, too large to ever see the walls of. That is the terrifying reality the emptiest place in the universe quietly hands us, not a monster waiting in the dark, but the dark itself. The plain, measured fact that nothing is what the universe is mostly made of, and we are among the rarest of exceptions to it. It is the kind of fact that could frighten, if you held it the wrong way, the sheer indifference of all that emptiness, the smallness of everything we have ever cared about set against it. And let it be a little frightening for a moment, because it is true, and because the truth of it is part of what makes the rest of the night's thought land. The universe was not made for us. It is mostly a vast, cold, silent dark that knows nothing of us, and would not miss us. Every person who has ever lived, every empire, and every language and every love, has happened, on a single mote of warmth adrift in an emptiness with no edge we can find. That is real, we do not have to look away from it. And yet, and this is where the long fall finally turns gentle, the very same truth, held a little differently, is one of the most consoling thoughts there is. Because if light is the exception, then light is precious beyond reckoning. If warmth is rare, then warmth is a small miracle, wherever it is found. A universe that is almost entirely empty makes the few places that are not empty extraordinary. And one of those places, against odds that beggar belief, is here. A world with oceans and forests and weather and morning. A world with someone resting in the quiet, listening to a voice describe the dark. In all the vast, patient emptiness we have crossed tonight, that is not a small thing. It may be the least small thing there is. Think of how much of what we have crossed tonight had none of it. The empty room inside the atom. No warmth. The dark between the planets. The long reaches between the stars. The million times emptier dark between the galaxies. The great hollows of the web. The deep heart of the Boötes Void. Cold, silent, lightless. Everyone. Across nearly the whole unimaginable breadth of the universe, there is no morning, no green thing growing, no voice, no rest. Only the patient dark, going on. And then, here, on this one improbable grain, there is all of it at once. Air to breathe, and water to drink, and light to see by, and a warm bed in a quiet room, and a mind, soft and slow, and ready for sleep. Set against all that emptiness, the ordinary comfort of an ordinary night is not ordinary at all. It is among the rarest and most precious arrangements of matter the universe has ever managed to make, and tonight, it is yours. And there is a stranger comfort still, folded inside the immensity. The Boötes Void does not judge. The great dark asks nothing of anyone. It keeps no record of our worries, weighs none of our mistakes, and does not care in the slightest whether we lie awake turning them over. It is simply, endlessly at peace. And against something that vast and that calm, the things that press on the mind at night begin, very gently, to lose their weight. The deadline, the argument, the long quiet list of small fears, set beside 300 million light-years of perfect stillness, they soften. They grow as light as they truly are. There is room, out there in all that emptiness, to set them down. So set them down. There is no hurry now, and nowhere to be. The same vast quiet that fills the space between the galaxies is here too, in this room, in the dark behind your eyes. It asks nothing of you, and it is in no rush at all. Let the breath go slow, let the body grow heavy and still, the way a world grows still when its day is done. Far overhead, the great dark is keeping its patient watch, as it has through every night that has ever fallen and every one still to come, and it does not need you to stay awake and keep it company. It will hold the stars in their places while you sleep. It will keep the slow turning of the galaxies, and the long silence of the voids, and the faint old light still crossing the emptiness toward us, all of it, without the smallest help from anyone. There is nothing left tonight that cannot wait until morning. There is only the warm small fact of being here, and the wide gentle dark all around it, and the slow soft pull of rest. Perhaps that is the truest gift of the emptiest place in the universe. It does not make us small in the way that diminishes. It makes us rare in the way that matters. Think of everything it took. A universe that spent its first 100 million years in total darkness, and will spend its last unimaginable ages in darkness again, somehow passed through a brief, bright middle, in which stars could burn at all. Among the few 100 billion stars of one ordinary galaxy, one quiet star drew together a handful of worlds. On one of those worlds, in a thin film of air over a crust of cooling rock, the chemistry grew complicated enough to copy itself, and to keep going. And after billions of years to wake up and notice that it was here. Set against the Boötes Void, against the 60 galaxies where 2000 should have been, against all the patient emptiness we have crossed tonight, the odds of any of it are so slight, they cannot really be felt. And yet here it is, the warmth, the breath, the quiet mind, turning these thoughts over before sleep. The universe is almost entirely empty. But it is not entirely empty. And the places where it is not, are the most precious and improbable things in all of creation. One of them is the world you are lying on tonight. One of them is you. Every void we have fallen through tonight belongs to the same cosmos that, in this one improbable corner, learned to wake and look back at the dark and wonder about it. The emptiness and the spark are not enemies. They are the same universe. One part of it vast and quiet and still, and one part of it, here, warm and almost asleep. To belong to both at once is not a loneliness. It is a kind of company that reaches all the way to the edge of everything. So let the dark be what it is tonight. Not a thing to fear, but the vast, patient quiet that everything bright is resting inside. Far out in the direction of Boötes, the great void holds its silence, as it has for billions of years, and will for billions more, empty, still, and utterly at peace. And here, an unimaginable distance away, on a small warm world that by any reasonable odds should not exist at all, there is breath, and there is rest, and there is you. One of the rarest things in all of creation, a spark of warmth and awareness afloat in an ocean of dark. There is nothing left to do now, nothing to solve, nothing to carry. The emptiness will keep its quiet whether we hold on or let go. So let go. Let the worries grow light and drift off into all that gentle space, and sink, slowly, into the same deep stillness that fills the universe between the stars. There is nothing more to reach for tonight, and nowhere further to go. We have traveled to the emptiest place there is, and found at the end of it, not a horror but a kind of peace. The deep, unhurried calm of a universe that has been mostly quiet, mostly dark, mostly at rest since long before we arrived, and will be long after. You are a small, warm part of that universe, resting now, exactly where you are meant to be. Let the breath slow, let the dark be soft. Let the great quiet that fills the space between the galaxies fill the space behind your eyes, and carry you down, gently, the way it carries the slow drift of the stars. Rest well. We'll wander the dark together again. Another night,